Hi everybody, and thanks for watching this recording. My name is Philippe Lefma from Autodesk Developer Technical Services, and today I'm going to talk about AutoCAD 2014 APIs. So this presentation is targeting programmers and software developers who are going to work with the upcoming release of AutoCAD. Let's start our presentation, and the agenda for this presentation is decomposed in two parts. The first one is the migration steps that are required in order for you to migrate your current application to the new release of AutoCAD. And then we will see in more detail the new APIs and features for the developers. So concerning the migration, this release of AutoCAD is going to be binary compatible. That means that your Object Aerix, .NET, DLL, and Lisp application should just work fine under AutoCAD 2014. As well, the DWG format is not changing. Concerning your installers, the version number is getting incremented with the minor number, so going to 19.1. As well, we will support Windows 8 and Windows XP is still maintained. Concerning compiler version, so mainly for C++ and .NET programmers, you are free to use Visual Studio 2010 or Visual Studio 2012, but then for C++ and Object Aerix application, you will need to set the platform toolset to V100. It means that AutoCAD is still using the runtime of Visual Studio 2010. For .NET programmers, you will need to target the framework 4, and as well, Visual Studio 2010 is going to be the official development environment for AutoCAD 2014. However, you should not have any problem in developing application under 2012. Concerning VBA, AutoCAD 2014 will include Microsoft VBA 7.1. Similarly than in the previous release, you will need to download the VBA enabler as a separate download. And then another good news is that this new version of VBA will support natively 64-bit application and 32-bit as well. So it means that our 64-bit VBA application will now run in process within AutoCAD, and then this will enhance the performances. A couple of enhancements concerning securities and some new system variables have been introduced in that new release of AutoCAD. So the first one is the secure load. This is a master switch that will either enable or disable all those security features. So that's basically a system variable that can be set to 0 or 1 in order to activate or disable those security features. Then the trusted path is a collection of paths that are considered trusted. So that means that if AutoCAD is loading a DLL or a third-party component from one of the trusted location, that should be transparent. And if a DLL is loaded outside of a trusted location, then the user will see a security dialog warning allowing him to cancel or allow the loading of that component. The trusted domain is a collection of trusted URLs, and we will see that in more detail when we talk about the JavaScript part in the second part of this presentation. And then the safe mode is a read-only system variables that will indicate if AutoCAD is running using the safe mode switch. A couple of security recommendations. You should digitally sign your installer, as well assume that the secure load is set, so make sure your app is placed on a trusted path. As well, assume that the trusted paths are read-only, so don't try to save temporary file on some of those locations, and always test your plugin with restricted user privilege, so assume that the user won't be administrator, and hence achieve your testing using a standard user profile. Concerning the plugins for the App Store, the recommended installation folder is now program data instead of app data. And the installer for the Exchange store will need to run with elevated privileges. It means that you will need to have administrator rights in order to install a plugin from the store. As well, we placed some optional guidelines for you in the network deployment friendly apps. So let's now talk about the new APIs and developer features for AutoCAD 2014. So the first new feature in AutoCAD 2014 API is going to be a basic georeferencing API taken from Maps3D. It allows you to create and modify georeference AutoCAD drawings. And basically it provides two new classes, ACDB geodata in Object Aerix and geolocation data in AutoCAD.net. And those objects allows you to convert from latitude and longitude to DWG points, and the other way around from a DWG coordinates into latitude and longitude. As well, the command geomap can be used in order to send commands to AutoCAD and modify the map view. So the most exciting feature of this AutoCAD 2014 API is the introduction of a brand new JavaScript API. This will open AutoCAD to the JavaScript web developers. And basically the idea is to allow AutoCAD to load a JavaScript-enabled HTML page inside a palette or a dialog. So we are in a little bit in the same situation that we were when the .NET API has been introduced. It means that the coverage of this JavaScript API is not 100%, comparing to what Aerix or .NET are capable of. But the API is extensible using the ACGS defunc or editor.defunctjs function in .NET, and those methods allows you to declare Aerix or .NET methods that are going to be exposed to JavaScript. So your JavaScript code will be able to call a loaded function inside an Aerix or .NET DLL if the functionality you wish to achieve is not provided by the JavaScript API. The other thing is that this JavaScript API is going to be shared with AutoCAD WS. So typically an application running inside an HTML page will be able to be displayed inside AutoCAD or inside AutoCAD WS. And this is where the trusted domain system variables come into the game, because you will now be able to load an HTML page for a remote location. Then if the page is contained inside a trusted domain, the page will just load fine, and if the page is outside of a trusted domain, then the user will get a security warning allowing him to allow or cancel the loading of that HTML page. So let's now take a look at some demos concerning this JavaScript API. So let's first take a look at the ACHTML.NET project. The project contains a custom .NET DLL that will allow us to load a selected HTML page inside a palette set. So I created the ADN demo command, a simple command that will prompt the user to select an HTML page stored locally on our machine. It will then create a new palette set, and you can see there it's doing a bit of formatting if the URI is a file, so it means if the selected HTML page is stored locally or online. And then it will invoke the palette set add method, passing that URI parameter in order to create a new palette containing our HTML page. So let's take a look in AutoCAD how it looks like. And I'm invoking this ADN demo command. So it will prompt me to select an HTML page. So you can see inside my unit test folder, I was breaking down the functionality of the JavaScript API into several unit tests that illustrates each of the area of the API. So let's start with the DB reactors, selecting that HTML page, and you can see that my HTML page gets loaded inside my palette over there. So this sample is simply creating a database reactor for the object modified and object erased. So I'm going to create a circle and a line, and I'm going to add a listener, so it prompts me to select an entity, selecting that line and that circle. And you can see that whenever I'm modifying or erasing those entities, it gets logged inside the event log. Let's try now to erase the circle, and here we are. Let's check the next JavaScript sample. So running the adn.gs demo command again, and the next sample illustrates the functionality of taking a screenshot of your drawing. So let's create some entities over there, and I'm going to capture a preview of my drawing. So what it's doing is creating an image of my drawing and then using that image in order to insert it inside our HTML page. You have as well the ability to modify the dimension of your image. The next sample illustrates the various prompt selection functionalities. So you can see here you can select the type of prompt. It can be a prompt corner, prompt point, integer, double, distance, angle, string, keywords, and file name. So let's select a point, for example, prompt for user input. Select a point, you can specify the message and the global keywords over there, and then all the various options for you depending on which kind of prompt you are using. So I'm not going to go through all of those. But let's select that point, for example, here, and you can see the result returned by the JavaScript API is a JSON string that contains the information. In that case, the status, the string result is empty, the value here is going to be the screen coordinate of the selected point, and the callback name if needed. Alright, the next sample concerns selection of a group of entities. So that's the prompt selection. And we need to have a set of entities over here. You can specify the message for adding, and in that case we are able to select either entities one by one or using group selection. So we can see here the return value is going to be an array of objects containing the object ID and the JS marker that was used to pick the entity. Alright, the next sample concerns system variables. So the JavaScript APIs allow us to access in read or write mode any system variables inside AutoCAD. So we can set here the name of a system variable, dialog for example, and we can retrieve its value, set to 1 at the moment. We can add a listener to get notification when the system variable is getting modified, and we can set the value of the system variable. So let's put 0 here. If the system variable is a point, then you can fill up those inputs. In that case, that's just a double or an integer, and I'm going to set the value of the system variable. So you can see that the value is now 0 and the callback has been triggered. The next sample is about transient graphics. So the API allows us to draw transient graphics on the screen. I could create a transient image, a transient vector. So let's create a new rectangle transient. Is going to be a red rectangle with solid line type. Could change those various parameters. Let's create, for example, a green dashed circle and provides the ability to update those transient graphics by providing the ID. So by default, the first graphic starts from 1 and is being incremented by 1. And I'm going to update our rectangle to be green, dashed, and filled. The API also provides functionalities for accessing the views properties and modifying the views inside the drawing. So you can see here I can select a point inside the drawing and it returns the pixel coordinate. Similarly, the point coordinates, the pixel coordinate are converted to drawing point. So you can see there the result. I can get the properties of the current view with the position, the target, the up vector, height and width of my view. I could set the properties of the view and a couple of other small functionalities. Inside this last sample, I was gathering a couple of miscellaneous functionalities. So we are here the ability to navigate to an online URL. So in that case, I was creating a website that I placed on the cloud, and that is going to invoke the JavaScript API. So I'm going to demo that in a minute. But first, I wanted to highlight the other functionalities. We can here type some JavaScript code that will be executed on the fly. We can show a modal dialog that points to a specific URL, show a task dialog, log in inside Autodesk 360, define a command, highlight an entities, and execute some AutoCAD commands. So let's take a look at the modal dialog, for example. It points to the Autodesk website. The task dialog there display our dialog, and as well it returns which button has been clicked, in that case the OK button. And let me show you now the online website. So when clicking that Go button, the JavaScript API will navigate to this online URL that is pointing to my custom ASP.NET website. As well, we provide the full source code for this if you are interested in taking a look. So you can navigate, you can see the HTML page of my website is now loaded. You can navigate through this website like you would do on a normal website, and then you can see it contains two parts that I'm going to explain in more details. So the entity demo part of that website would allow me to select a group of entities inside the drawing, and it will then invoke an Aerix method in order to grab the DXF code of that entity and store those code on a cloud database. And then the idea was to reload those entities either inside the same or a different DWG. Unfortunately, at the moment, the load functionality doesn't work quite well. So I have to skip that demo for the moment. And the view part of that demo is doing pretty much the same, but using the views. So it means that it will invoke the JavaScript API in order to save the current view properties under a custom name. So for example, view number 1, I'm going to orbit a little bit the drawing here, and then I'm going to save that view. So at the moment it's sending those properties to one of my custom table hosted on the cloud. I'm then able to switch the view. I'm going to save that under view number 2. Save view number 2, and you can see I have now access to my two views, so I'm able to reload view number 1 or view number 2. So the last sample I wanted to illustrate is the functionality to invoke an Aerix method from JavaScript. So you can see here is a JavaScript Aerix project I was creating, Aerix GS test, and it contains two JavaScript callable methods. So the first one is the test Aerix read. So here I placed in the comment that an Aerix method that can be invoked from JavaScript needs to have the following signature. It needs to return char, and it takes as input const char, pointer to const char, where the args is a JSON formatted string that contains the arguments you want to pass potentially from JavaScript to Aerix, and then the return type is similarly a JSON formatted string that contains at least the red code member plus any custom member you may need. So what is doing this Aerix read is accessing the model space for read, and then it will iterate through the content of the model space in order to display at the command line the various entities that it contains based on the object class name. The second method illustrates the Aerix write, so it allows us to call that Aerix method from JavaScript that is going to do some modification inside the database, and in order to do that you need to lock the current document and unlock it at the end. So that's why I was wrapping inside those doclock and docunlock methods that you need to place at the beginning and at the end of your method. In that case you are simply going to create a circle and post that to the database using that custom method that is provided above. Once you created your Aerix method, you can simply define those methods using this ACGS defunc. You specify the name of the method that you want to use when you call it from JavaScript, provides here the name of your method inside that Aerix, and here you provide a flag that can be one of those following values. So let's take a look inside AutoCAD in order to test that. I was as well creating an HTML and JavaScript files in order to test it. So if we want to take a quick look at the HTML page, it simply contains two buttons that are going to invoke those Invoke Aerix read and Aerix write methods. And here is the code for those methods in JavaScript, simply using the exec async. So you need to invoke those methods asynchronously, passing here the name we used inside our Aerix to declare those methods, provide a success and error callback. So here is the Invoke Aerix read, invokes Aerix write. So let's switch to AutoCAD in order to see those working. So we're going to load similarly our HTML page. So you can see that HTML page that contains our top buttons. I'm going to create a couple of entities here, maybe a polyline, a circle. Right, I'm now going to upload the Aerix. So obviously the Aerix needs to be loaded inside AutoCAD before invoking the JavaScript. And I'm going to run the Aerix read. You can see those entities there, and the Aerix write that should have created a new circle over there at the origin. So that's it concerning the demo of our new JavaScript API. You can refer to the samples and the source code for more details. You can see there the JavaScript API reference, that is an online HTML page, and as well the JavaScript API for developers that is provided as an online single script that you can directly reference inside your HTML code. That's the end of this presentation. Thank you very much for attending it, and good luck in migrating your current application to AutoCAD 2014.